Prestigious and outdoor awards, and there is so much that we would like to hear him say. So welcome to us all.
Thank you very much. I never was a good sound recorder, so that's helpful. This is a daunting gig for an amateur. For some there was a soft job, or as my father said, not a proper job. Speaking on this incredibly important subject with serious professionals who devoted their life to this matter. So I feel rather humbled in this company. And I rather wondered how I could approach it, because world peace in 15 minutes is quite a challenge. So I thought what I might do is to talk about 3 wars that we've had to research and done films about, and try to draw the conclusions from those, and then have a series of demands that we might make, and responsibilities that we might share. So that's my strategy for this intimidating audience. The first conflict that we made a film about was the conflict in Nicaragua and the Sandinista revolution, which toppled Somoza, the dictator. And the Sandinistas had a program, as I guess everyone here knows, of literacy, of health for the people in a desperately poor country, education, and taking over by the people of major industries, nationalisation, putting the interests of the people first. And the response of the United States was to train and fund a terrorist organisation, Contra, and they waged war. And my connection began, not directly, but with a man called Paul Laverty, who became the writer I've worked with for the last 27, 28 years. And Paul, before I knew him, he was a solicitor, and he went to Nicaragua, he went to the north of the country, and he observed, as an observer for a human rights organisation, he observed the catastrophic attacks on health centres, on the attacks on villages, on the slaughter of innocent civilians, on the attacks on schools, and the undermining of the infrastructure of the whole country, the destruction of the Sandinistas, and in the end the fear of the people who voted the song in an apparent, allegedly free election. Of course, it wasn't an election in fear, voted that they couldn't maintain this revolutionary government. Reagan boasted he was a Contra. And that was that war, and we made a little film about it. And it destroyed the hopes of those people. At the time it was said it was the threat of a good example, which I'm quite liking, the threat of a good example. And the lesson for that really is that in defense of their interests, the big capitalist economies will do anything. They will destroy democracy, they will destroy freedom, they will kill. And there's a very interesting, some of you may know, there's a very interesting summary of this, when a general let the cat out of the bag, and it's quite a famous summary of it. I thought it might read it in case no one's heard it. It's General Smedley D. Butler, working in 1935, and he wrote this. He read this, it said, I spent 33 years and 4 months in active military service as a member of this country's most agile military force, the Marine Corps. That's the American Corps. So I served in all commissions, ranks, from second lieutenant to major general, and during that period I spent most of my time being a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street, and for the bankers. I helped make Mexico and especially Tampico safe for American oil interests in 1914. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National City Bank boys to collect revenues in. I helped in the raping of half a dozen Central American republics for the benefit of Wall Street. I helped purify Nicaragua, this is previous war, I helped purify Nicaragua for the International Banking House of the Brown Brothers in 1902 to 1912, and he went on and he went on. And he said, looking back on it, I might have given Al Capone a few hints. The best he could do was operate his racket in 3 districts. I operated on 3 continents. That's American capital, and that's behind those walls. So that was the first one, and the first lesson. Second one was the Spanish Civil War. And in 1936, there was this Republican government in Spain, again acting in the interest of the people, establishing collectives in industries, collectives on the land, dealing with the economic crisis by empowering the people to take control of their resources and the land they lived on and the land they farmed. There were Western interests in Spain, British properties, British industries, and when the fascist Franco invaded to challenge the Socialist Republic, he was supported by Germany and Italy, armed by Germany and Italy. Did the British step in to support a democratically elected government? Did the French? Did the Americans? Of course not. Of course not. They had wealth involved. They had wealth tied up. So their position was, we won't send you any arms at all. You're on your own. And cargo ships stayed outside the country so they wouldn't dock to provide resources for the Republic, democratically elected Republic. In fact, British intelligence actually supported Franco's invasion by getting the plane for Franco to get there. Now this is 1936. Fascism is on the march. They knew all about what was going on in Germany. They knew about the racism. And they chose fascism. That's the British government chose to allow fascism to succeed. It's a part of the history we tend to forget. And part of this whole struggle is to remember our history, recall our history, because then you see through the lies we get at the moment. And the way we celebrate the Second World War, standing alone against Nazis and against fascism. Well, 3 years earlier, we were happy to see the fascists win. And I think it's time we remember that and actually had a cold eye on raw nationalist propaganda that rewrites history in favour of what some of us call the ruling class. The third war was the war in Ireland, was the Irish War of Independence. And Ireland, again, as you all know, was a colony of Britain since the Norman times, when landlords went over there and took the land, or some of it. And it's been a colony ever since. And there was a war of independence, struggle for independence over 200 years. And finally, Ireland voted, as one country, voted for independence, a united Ireland in 1919. By a massive majority. I think it was 73 out of just over 100. Massive majority. Irish independence. We vote for it democratically. British response: close down the Parliament, close down the press, send in the troops. And it became a war of independence. And the Irish looked like winning it. So the British, led by Churchill, of course, old imperialist, led by Churchill, imposed a treaty, or negotiated a treaty, which divided the country, into partition the country. And we've lived through that, and we know it's been maintained at the point of a gun for most of its 100 years. And when you try to tell that story, as we did, we got more abuse than you care to imagine. We were called, well, I was called called the worst propagandist than Leni Riefenstahl. And Leni Riefenstahl was Hitler's propagandist. That was a Tory MP said that. Well, you might say it as that. She was a good filmmaker, but that's all that we can say for her. I was asked, why do I hate my country? And there's Simon Heffer, the journalist on the Telegraph, some of you probably, I hope you don't read him, but anyway, just to tell you what he said. He said, I haven't seen the film. He said, I don't want to see the film because I don't need to read Mein Kampf to know what a louse Hitler was. That was Simon Heffer. But the best one was Michael Gove.
Oh, Michael Gove.
Wrote that the trouble with the Republic, this was a disgraceful film, and the trouble with the Republicans was they never chose democracy. Well, I think he was Minister of Education at the time. So if he'd opened his history books, he'd have read that the Irish did, in fact, vote for democracy. It was the British that trampled on it. So, again, what's the lesson from that? The lesson from that is imperialists never give up. And that the wars of imperialism are remorseless. So, what should our demand be? I was particularly struck by what Lord Desai said about the United Nations being not fit for purpose, and that's absolutely central. The great problem with international law is that we don't have sanctions. That is the problem. Whatever of the law system, there is a law-making body, and that law-making body can usually enforce the law. We make international laws, but how do we enforce them? And it's only an international body that can be the policeman of the world. We can't subcontract that to the Americans and Donald Trump. And we can't subcontract it to Stalinist Russia either. Which no longer exists. We couldn't be. You can't subcontract it. It has to be an international body where every country has a vote. And I absolutely endorse what you're saying. It has to be democratic. Now, more learned people than me will have ideas how we can achieve that. But that's absolutely fundamental. We must have a democratic international body. Secondly, we need a foreign policy which is based on international law and human rights. We cannot have a foreign policy like Tony Blair did, of we know what's right, we'll go in all guns blazing, and the devil take the hindmost. That was absolutely a crime against international law, and the 1 million people or more who died and the 4 million or so displaced, destabilized the whole region. That was a war crime. If it's an international war, if it's against international law, it's a crime. And to me, and this may be controversial, I think those people should be in The Hague, standing trial for their deaths. Third, but only two more. Third, I think is when our country ignores international law, I think civil society has an obligation. It has an obligation to campaign for human rights. It has an obligation to campaign against oppression, against dictatorships, against those countries that deny the rule of law. We have to show solidarity with the oppressed, and I think that we have to campaign on that, we have to argue for it, we have to go to where the oppression is, we have to stand shoulder to shoulder with those people who are suffering. And that's a responsibility that citizens have when the government refuses to accept its responsibility to uphold international law. And we can all take part in that. That's a collective responsibility. Now, as I understand it, the Kurds are asking for international solidarity to be shown in terms of a boycott. Now, the crimes being committed against them is horrendous, as we know. It seems to be a form of ethnic cleansing from the Erdogan's Turkish, from Erdogan's speeches. That seems to be what they're about. And if that is their call, then I cannot see why we should not obey, because they are the people who are suffering. They are best placed to say, this is what we need. So I think you have an obligation to. And I think that's the tragedies that, again, that Fabian referred to for the Rohingya, in the Yemen, appalling atrocities happening. Again, we have an obligation as citizens to do what we can to support them. If our government insists on selling arms to Saudi Arabia, in the case of the Yemen conflict, absolutely intolerable. The arms trade has to be, this is again part of our foreign policy, the arms trade has to be controlled. And we cannot sell arms to countries who have contempt for international laws. That includes Saudi Arabia, includes many other countries. Another issue, responsibility of the Kurds, the support for the Palestinians, again being referred to, one of the longest going conflicts. When the Palestinians call for our support, I think we have to give it. When they call for a boycott, to show the world that the oppression is not acceptable, then we should support it. And we should absolutely support the Palestinians in the way they ask, because they are suffering. They're having their land stolen, they're having their houses destroyed, they're having their daily life disrupted at checkpoints, people not able to get to medical appointments. They are being killed with impunity in Gaza, and Gaza is made into a hellhole that will be unlivable in a very short time. We have to support them with the boycott as they see fit to us. So there are those campaigns and struggles, and we have to keep them active. And I think, just to put it in context, I think that a boycott is a tactic. There's no point in, when someone would like to boycott America, it's not going to do us any good. It's a tactic that should be judged on its effectiveness. It's not a principle you can apply everywhere, because it's plainly a waste of time and not effective. But it was effective in South Africa. And that was important to show that solidarity with the South African, with the ANC and the freedom movement there. And finally, I think we have to show solidarity with individuals who struggle, with individuals who are imprisoned. Following sense of the Russian filmmaker I knew of and who's just been released. Many people who mainly, of course, political people in the countries where they live. Imprisoned political prisoners, we have to show solidarity with them in the best way we can. Many examples, Camilla Shamsi, a writer, showing solidarity with the Palestinians in a speech in Germany, and her prize, the literary award that she was given, withdrawn. Because it was said to be racist things. She said what she was doing was saying, I support the boycott. And the Germans said, no, we can't have that. So your prize is taken away. Shocking. And one other contentious figure I'd like to mention, Julian Assange.
Yes.
Julian Assange.
Yes.
He actually, we know a lot of things we ought to know and we wouldn't have known without WikiLeaks. And he may not have done everything correctly, I don't know his whole history. But for him to be arrested in the way he had, for him to be confined, and they know why he didn't. He didn't accept the bail conditions because he was afraid he was going to be taken to America, where right-wing politicians have called for his death, and he faces life imprisonment. And in those circumstances, he took refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy, and for that, he's now in prison, been in prison since the beginning of the year. There are no charges outstanding against him in Sweden. There are no charges outstanding against him in this country. And yet he is in virtually solitary confinement. And these are a couple of messages from John Pilger, who's a friend and journalist, I guess you know. And he's written these two comments, having met Julian Assange. And he says, if I can find it, my chaotic bit of paper here. I saw Julian Assange today in Belmont Prison, denied the tools to prepare his defense against extradition to America. His resilience endures. On Monday, he appeared at Westminster Magistrates Court, where his epic fight begins. It's the fight for democracy. And again, more recently, John wrote, I spoke to Julian Assange at the weekend. His psychological torture is unabated. He remains isolated in his small cell, mostly 23 hours a day, denied proper exercise. He has lost more, I think he lost 15 kilos in weight. Although approved, phone calls to his parents are still not possible. This is, says Britain, 2019. I mean, the man has not been convicted of anything. He's being tortured. The UN rapporteur said this amounts to torture. Why is this? If in our own country a man is imprisoned, incarcerated, 23 hours a day, because he told us the truth of what the Americans were doing in Iraq, and we remember that video of civilians being gunned down in cold blood, that was because of WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. This is how we recognise the freedom of the press. The fight for that is fight for a democratic press, and it's an essential struggle for the rule of law. So that's one that we have to support, and it's a symbol for all those. So we've got a big struggle. I think there's things we can do as civilians, as civil society. There are things we can demand of our next government, and my God, I hope we know which government we're going to get, because we need it. We need it. That's international law and human rights, a regenerated United Nations, and an absolutely unequivocal opposition to violence to others. Thank you.